And let us now summarize the most important things that we have discussed so far. And we come to the three basic modes: the volume control mode, the pressure control mode, and the pressure support mode, and I contrasted them against each other. The trigger in a volume control mode is either timed or by the patient, which actually means that there is a set respiratory rate. The patient breathes at least that much or more than that set rate. In a pressure control mode, similarly, the trigger can be either by time or by the patient. But in a pressure support mode, all the breaths are triggered by the patient. The cycling in a volume control and a pressure control mode both is by time, which tells you that the inspiratory time is always fixed and the expiratory time keeps changing. It is something that we can never set in an assist control mode, which actually will be dependent on the respiratory rate of the patient. If the rate that is set and the rate which the patient takes is same, the expiratory time will remain fixed. But if the patient breathes at a higher rate, then the expiratory time will be compromised to accommodate those many breaths. The cycling in pressure support mode is by a phenomena which is known as flow, which is a drop in the flow from the peak flow which is generated by the patient effort, and once that is reached, the breath cycles from the inspiratory to the expiratory phase. The major target of a volume control mode is a volume, in a pressure control mode is a pressure, and in a pressure support mode is also the pressure, whereas what we do not have in control here is the pressure and the volume in the two other modes. So to safeguard against that, the most important alarm that we send for a volume control mode is the pressure. For a pressure control mode is the volume, either by what amount of tidal volume is delivered or what is the amount of minute ventilation which is generated. And in a pressure support mode, it is volume, but as well as an apnea. How long can we wait to see that the patient does not make any effort? In modern ventilators, generally they have a backup mode. So if for a particular period of time, if no effort is registered by the ventilator, as a safeguard, it will switch over to a control mode in which it will try to deliver a particular number of breaths as a safeguard mode. Now let us look at the major issues which can happen, like a block of the airway, spasms, secretions, kinking of the tubes. What will they do? They will increase the pressures. And if the patient is on a volume control mode, we can actually see the peak and the plateau pressures, and the difference between the two increases, which points to that the problem is with the resistance in the airways. On the other hand, if the patient has pulmonary edema, there is a collapse, consolidation, he coughs in between, there is a pneumothorax, then there will be a sudden rise in the pressures. And if the patient is on a volume control mode, we can check the peak and the plateau, and we will see that both the peak and the plateau have increased. The difference between the two has not increased much, which tells us that something is happening at the level of the parenchyma of the lungs. Leaks which can happen due to poor cuff seal, which can happen due to disconnections, which can happen due to some rents or some open areas in the circuit. Then we will see that the inspiratory tidal volume and expiratory tidal volume do not match each other because there is a leak. There could be a loss of PEEP, so suddenly the PEEP, which is a fixed value that we set on a ventilator, starts to drop. There could be a loss in the volume which is delivered, there could be a loss in the pressures which was generated in the airways, and the patient may fail to trigger because trigger is dependent on an integrated, very non-leaky circuit, so that the little effort which is put by the patient is transmitted to the ventilator as a drop in the flow or a drop in the pressure which is getting registered by the ventilator. And sometimes there could be excessive triggering because of a leak somewhere which is registered as a drop in the pressure. So you can have poor triggering phenomena whenever there is a leak. If we can identify this very little of a patient who is on a ventilator and we can measure the parameters on the ventilator, we would have done a good job.